I really just wanted to use today's share to finish off Tosis, Diva Masel Reches. So Tosis' opening questions on Rabbi Yehuda was from Keli, which we discussed, and then from Shraga to Mishcha, which Tosis assumes is a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. And we saw the Ravid who said that he thinks this isn't a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur because it's not, you're not using it for an Issa. The Issa is being done to it. And that doesn't make it a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. That was the Ravid's point. When I explained the Ravid, I slipped a little bit into another svara, which isn't really the Ravid, but it's a separate answer, the Ramban's answer, which we'll look at in a moment. The Ramban says it's not a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur because it's perfectly mutter to have lights burning on Shabbos. So there's two separate answers that the Rishonim give. Tosfos assumes it's a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. The Ravid says you're doing the Issa to it, but not with it. It's not a lighter, a cigarette lighter, a candle lighter, a box of matches. This sort of thing would be a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. But a tinder box would be a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur, a flint. But a lamp is an Issa is done to it, or not. It isn't the Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. That's the Ravid's question. The Ramban says it's not melachot LeIssur. You're allowed to benefit from light on Shabbos. A lamp is a Keli within which a flame, a wick, a psila burns, but that's not an Issa. It's perfectly mutter to benefit from it. Those are the two answers of the Rishonim that are cholik on Tosfos, and they both seem very strong answers. Let's just have a quick look at the Ramban. I mentioned that I regretted finishing the Ramban, but maybe I shouldn't have regretted it, because the Ramban does mention this one extra answer. So let's just look at the final paragraph in the Ramban in source 1. The Ikka Takashale, he asked Tosfos question, how can Rabbi Yehuda hold that Keli Shemelachto LeIssur is also circle for the Mekomei, while Ihu Amar Beperikira Shraga the Mishcha Shari Little Tula on Rabbi Shemelachto is the circle of Mutter. So you see that LeIssur it's Mutter even as Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. So his first answer is V'yesh Matarit, and this is derived. The Neos Lav Melachto LeIssur in Neos are not Melachto LeIssur. She'ena Ela Bosses the Psila Shemen. It's just a bosses for the Psila and the Shemen. Then Oisim Melacha, you don't do a Melacha with it. V'lo Amru Ela Kugan Kurnos and Magera. The Keli Shemelachto is where you use it for the Issa, like a Kurnos or a Magera, a hammer, or a scraper. What's called a LeIssur or a plane. These sorts of things. Shemen Oisim Melachas Issa. Hachinami Lo Kashalu. He also brings the Gemara of candlesticks. Rabbi Shimon Matzirin Bahem, Rabbi Yehuda Osram, Muktza Machmas Mios for Issa Hayom. No one says the Issa is because of Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. Ken Kostel's arrived. So in brief, Permutas, which are the sugya of candlesticks and the sugya of Mishcha, of the oil lamp, are according to the Ravid, are not a question because of what we saw this far, that they're simply a bosses, they're not Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. Then he says Velina, so now this is the Ramban speaking. Sheneus Mishamshi Shabbos Hein. Neus are Mishamshi Shabbos. Ve'in Melachto LeIssur. It's not a melachot LeIssur, and a going Kurnos Reches. She'enim Tashmish Kavur b'Shabbos. A Kurnos and a Reches, there's pitchfork and these sorts of things, the shovel, these sorts of things are melachot LeIssur. Whereas a lamp is Tashmishe Shabbos, and therefore it's not melachot LeIssur. That's the Ramban's answer to the question. So I just want to make 2 points. The first is that the Ravid's Chiddush, that it's not a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur because it's merely a bosses, is really a discussion in the Mishnah Berurah. And the Mishnah Berurah paskins against the Ravid, but like Tosfos. So I put this as a second sheet on the WhatsApp group, but this is the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Ayin Tes Sif Hey. Says Ner Shedlika b'Shabbos l'Chayil l'Chayil v'Yalda. V'Yalda Chayav v'Nisraf ha'Chayil. So this is the Shulchan Aruch that I brought. A light which is lit on Shabbos for a Chayil, for someone giving birth. And then it goes out. Mutter l'Taltel cover. You're allowed to move if it goes out. Then in Sivov, the Shulchan Aruch says Neshe Shelo Yidlika b'Yis Shabbos, and there that they didn't light on Shabbos again. Mutter l'Taltel, you're allowed to be metalted it. And in both cases, the Mishnah Berurah says Hainu l'Tzorech Gufa l'Tzorech Mekomei. This is l'Tzorech Gufa l'Tzorech Mekomei because it's a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur. And in the Shartziyah, then Sif Tazayin, he brings that a ner is a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, and he brings the Prima Egozim who argues, but he says that this is the Halacha, and then he says that a wallet or the like, which you set aside for Mos, is also a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. So the Mishnah Paskins, like Tosis against the Ravid, that a lamp which is merely a bosses for a flame is nonetheless called a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Very, very interesting.
You're saying merely a bosses, and the bosses worse.
It has different strengths and weaknesses. When its flame is the Ravid really says two svaras. The first svara he says is that it's when the flame is the first svara is he says it's not a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, and the second svara is he says that somehow it's dedicated for the shraga, for the flame. But nonetheless, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur can't be used for the Sochel Komei, but this lantern or lamp or candlesticks could, because they're not Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. The only halachic factor you need to think about is them being a bosses if the flames are light. But once the flame goes out, then maybe yes. Or if it wasn't lit that Shabbos, or if you only lit it on Shabbos for a chola. When I say mini bosses, I mean you have to work through whether it's a bosses or not. But the chumrah of Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't move it to Sochel for the Sochel Mekoma wouldn't apply for these things. That's the Ravid Svara. The Mishnah argues, and the Mishnah says it is a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. And the Mishnah passes like Tosis more accurately. So the Mishnah doesn't spell it out like this, but in our learning of the Sugya, turns out this is Machlokas Ravid and Tosis. The second Svara, the Svara of the Ramban, that it's not a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, is also an interesting one, because then it would come out that pots that are used for cooking with are also not Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Because a pot is true, it's used for cooking with, but you're allowed to cook on Shabbos. Meaning to say, you're allowed to have kelim continuing to cook on Shabbos by themselves. You're not allowed to put food to cook on Shabbos. But once something is already cooking, you're allowed to leave it cooking on Shabbos. So again, the same story would apply, like the Ramban says that the tashmish should be mutter. The Ramban's Lashon is, he says that that these are things which are used on Shabbos. The lanterns are used on Shabbos. Mishamshei Shabbos. He says that from the Mishamshei Shabbos, the things that are used for Shabbos, and therefore they're not Muktza. So l'chora, you would also think that pots are Mishamshei Shabbos because you can leave things cooking on Shabbos, and therefore again wouldn't be called a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, which is an interesting thing. That's the l'chora would come out. I was wondering if that's I'm not 100% convinced that's muchach, because you could be mechalik that a light which is burning on Shabbos, you're using it on Shabbos. The human is using it. Now, man's not going with the Ravid Svara. He thinks that a ner is a kli, potentially a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. He just says you're using it for perfectly mutter Shabbos use of benefiting from a Shabbos because it gives out light. Whereas a pot that's cooking maybe is not your use. Maybe your use is just putting it on the flame, but once it's on the flame, which is also to do on Shabbos, and once it's on the flame, it just gets on and does its own thing. So maybe the Ramban would agree over there that the whole thing that makes it a kli is when you put it on the flame, but once it's on the flame, it's doing its own thing, and therefore it wouldn't be a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. I don't know. But I'm just mentioning this sugya is a very important sugya in terms of two svaras. One is whether a lantern is a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur as per the Ravid, because you're doing the Issa on it but not with it. And the second svara is the Rambans, that things which are used on Shabbos for mutter use are not Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Therefore the Ramban says the lantern is Mishamshei Shabbos, it's things that you use on Shabbos in a perfectly mutter way to give light. Would we extend that to pots or not? I'm not sure. The Ramban would say the same svara by pots. Pots are used for, you can't cook on Shabbos, but you can leave a pot cooking on Shabbos.
You say the oven as well, stove as well.
Right. And Hanami. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, a Keli. If you cooked in a Keli, the same thing would apply. Yeah. Or maybe not, because it's just cooking. You're not using it. The light you're using on Shabbos. I'm not sure. I don't know what you think about that. Sorry, you could argue the pot also. You're using it on Shabbos because it's cooking for you. A pot is a Keli that serves humans to hold food over the flame, right? That's what a pot is. Instead of having to stand there with a pot, spear into your sausage and it's held over the flame, it's like in a barbecue. A pot cooks it for you. So is that called tashmish adam, or maybe it's putting it on the flame? That's the shimmer of the pot. And once it's on the flame, that's not called tashmish Shabbos, Mashamshe Shabbos, the Rosh Hashanah, because it just does its own thing. You're not using it, whereas the lantern you're using to benefit from on Shabbos. So that's for it to think about. You're not looking very happy about this. It's okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so that's just the next one. Tosfos. Tosfos. There's three more hours really I want to say on Tosfos. Tosfos brings this machlokas as to whether a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur is allowed to be moved l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi. That's what Tosfos is going on in Rav Yehuda, and then Tosfos compares it to so I'm just losing my train of thought. It's me. Sorry, okay, so I just need to get Chashman right. Tosfos understands that the ner is a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur, and Tosfos says that should be caught up in the machlokas Rav Yehuda and let's say Rabbi and Hemshech Gemara, whether Keli Shemelachto LeIssur is mutter l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi. That's what Tosfos says, and he says the Keli Shemelachto LeIssur should be also l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi. Then the Gemara, however, contrasts this to Shalnafta, the tar lamp, or Yoshon, an old lamp, which is Muktza machmas mius. So we'll get to Muktza machmas mius later, but in Tosfos you see, I'm hesitating here because I'm just wondering whether this is drawing us into a sukkah that I don't want to go into now. I'll just park this and I'll say one ha'ara and then I'll move on from this. That in Tosfos you see that's a Keli Shemelachto something which is Muktza machmas mius. Tosfos holds is a yet more stringent level of Muktza and would even be also I'm going to leave Muktza machmas mius actually. I don't want to get us caught into it. We'll get to it later and I'm going to leave it for now. Has anyone seen Muktza machmas mius or you didn't? No one went in.
Yeah.
In the Gemara when you looked up the Gemara earlier. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just say the very core point, and then I won't dwell on it because we'll get to it later. The Gemara in the earlier sugya is contrasting basically a shemen demishcha to a tar lamp or to an old lamp as opposed to a new lamp. In both those cases, it's Muktza machmas mius. It's an oily, greasy, tarred, singed, scorched Keli with soot on it, a sooty Keli. And in that case, the Gemara says it's Muktza machmas mius. Now, according to Tosfos's reading of the sugya, there's something that I didn't really go into that we didn't really discuss. The Gemara over there just says that Rav Yehuda says mutter l'taltel b'Shabbos. Tosfos adds into that means to say it's mutter l'taltel l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi, and therefore he says it's a stira Rav Yehuda. Here Rav Yehuda says that Keli Shemelachto LeIssur is also l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi, and over there he says it's mutter l'taltel l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi. Tosfos is mashma that he wasn't bothered by everyone agreeing that it's also l'taltel Muktza machmas mius. So all we see in that Tosfos is that Tosfos' opinion is that Muktza machmas mius would be also l'tzorech kufah l'tzorech makomi. In other words, that doesn't get caught up in the machlokas. Now, I mentioned that too far away because we will learn later Muktza machmas mius, the sukkah Muktza machmas mius. But very briefly, just to bring out the svara, the whole lomdus of a Keli Shemelachto LeIssur, why it should be Muktza b'Sorcha for the Sorcha Mekomos, because it's a Keli, and therefore it's omed for other Tashmishim. Tosfos isn't bothered by a cliche that Muktza machmas mias, that it should be also the Sorcha for the Sorcha Mekomos, and so it would be because it's mos, because it's something disgusting, you wouldn't use it for anything else. It's greasy or it's sooty, you wouldn't use it for anything else, and therefore it would be also the Sorcha for the Sorcha Mekomos. So I'm just, since we're trying to accumulate data around Muktza, just another sorrow to file away. The reason there's machlokus about Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, whether it's allowed for other uses or not, is because it's a kli. A kli is a kli is a kli. It's even if its main use is as a hammer to hammer in that, not hammer in nails or a blacksmith's hammer, which is a kli shemelachto LeIssur. Nonetheless, if I can find another use for it, I'll use it for another use. It's a kli, and therefore it's muktza l'sorach gufo for cracking coconuts. That's what we see with regular kelim. With muktza machmas mios, Tosfos isn't bothered that it's osur l'taltel. And what does it mean it's osur l'taltel? According to Tosfos, it obviously means it's osur l'taltel l'sorach gufo l'sorach mekomo. In other words, Tosfos understood that muktza machmas mios is osur l'sorach gufo l'sorach mekomo. Why? Because since it's mos, it's not omed for any other use. It's not the sort of keli that we would use for another use because it's greasy and oily. Picture your Hanukkah, containers which are oily and greasy. You wouldn't use them for anything else, and therefore it's muktza. Their Tosfos would agree it's osur l'sorach for the Sorcha Mekomos. I mentioned that simply because if you look at the Shulchan Aruch that I printed on the final source that I gave out on the WhatsApp group in Shin in Reish Ayin Tes Sif Hey and Sif Vav, you see that Halacha we don't paskin like that. We paskin that even muktza machmas mios is muktza l'sorcha for the Sorcha Mekomos. So maybe I shouldn't have gone into this now because it's a little bit off subject, but it's just something that comes out in Tosfos. The final point then I'll just make in Tosfos for now is sorry, have I confused everyone here, or is anyone with me? Maybe yeah, it's okay. Just a simple sorrow for now. At one day, hopefully, Mi'at Hashem, we will get to a sugya around muktza machmas mios. Maybe I shouldn't have brought this up now, but if you looked at the Gemara there, the Gemara says that you're allowed to move a lamp, which is an oil lamp. Tosfos translates that Gemara to mean Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. You can move the Sorach Gufo, the Sorach Mekomo, implying that if it's a mos, if it's something that gets dirty through its use, you're not allowed to use it. So for the Sorach Mekomo. Why? Because since it becomes something mos, it becomes something horrible and dirty. It's not omed for other uses. It excludes other uses. So you have, in a sense, according to this opinion, two extremes. You have chisoron kis. You have a very valuable keli, which isn't omed for any uses other than its main use, and you have a mos keli, which isn't omed for any other use other than its main use because it's mos. So in those two cases, it's issa use excludes any other use, and only kelim in the middle are Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Halacha we don't paskin like this, but this is what comes out from the maths of Tosfos. That Tosfos understood that kli, which is mos, muktza machmas mios, is also the Sorcha for the Sorcha Mekomos.
I don't understand. In the Tosfos, he doesn't say Dahainu the Sorach Gufo Mekomo. He just says the Sorach Gufo. Sorach Gufo.
Sorry, yes, sorry. Sorach Gufo. Rashi says the Sorach Mekomo is a kal v'chomer. Sorach Gufo is also, and Sorach Mekomo is also.
Yeah, but we had a discussion whether that is a valid kal v'chomer, didn't we? And
in Tosfos' answer, you can debate whether it's valid kal v'chomer. In Tosfos' question, it would definitely be a valid kal v'chomer. And the reason Tosfos says Hainu Sorach Gufo is because all you see in Rav Yehuda over here is that it's also the Sorach Gufo. So Rav Yehuda is just talking about Sorach Gufo. So assuming Tosfos agrees with Rashi, Sorach Gufo and Sorach Mekomo, if not, they're not. But La Halacha, Sorach Gufo, Sorach Mekomo also, Tosfos says that you see the muktza machmas mios. Tosfos learns La Halacha, Sorach Gufo, Sorach Mekomo is mutter, but Tosfos holds that muktza machmas mios, Sorach Gufo would be also.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. The final letter I want to say is that Tosfos says, or second penultimate Torah, Tosfos says that Ein Loma Zemayu Kashichton Hatter Kazamoku Rav Yehuda. Tosfos wants to attempt to answer that. Sorry, again, I'm probably getting myself into stuff we haven't yet done. I'll just make this second point. Tosfos wants to attempt to answer that Rav Yehuda would talk about is talking about where he was miyached the shraga for another use, and Tosfos says that's not a good answer. So again, Tosfos' question is, how can Rav Yehuda say that you can move the lantern for Torah Kufay. Here he says you can't move the lamps in a Torah Kufay. Well, says Tosfos, I have a good answer. That he's talking about where you miyachid it. And so he says, Ein Lomi, you can't say that that's what it's talking about because it doesn't seem a reasonable reason that we're miyachid it. You wouldn't be miyachid it for anything. Fine. Tosfos seems to imply that that were I able to say that this is talking about where you miyachid it, then everything would be good. Again, you see in Tosfos the same logic. If that would be the reason the Gemara would be saying a regular oil lamp you can be miyachid for mutter use, and then it would be allowed. But Muktza machmas mius, you can't be miyachid for a mutter use because it's mos. So again, just the same thing. You see Tosfos' vision of Muktza machmas mius that you can't be miyachid Muktza machmas mius, otherwise it'd be also. Again, just to be clear, Rabbi Yehuda said that you're allowed to move this oil lamp. Tosfos is struggling to understand why. Our Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda says that Kli Shemelachto is, so you can't move the Torah Kufay. Tosfos says, I would understand the Gemara if it's a case where you miyachid it, just like over here in our sukkah, you miyachid the hammer for mutter uses, then Rabbi Yehuda would agree you're allowed to move it. Says Tosfos, if that was the reason, then that Gemara would be good. And as that Gemara says, that translation of that Gemara would be, an oil lamp that you miyachid for a mutter use is mutter, but a tar lamp that you miyachid for mutter use wouldn't be mutter. Why? Because it's mos, and therefore you can't be miyachid it for a mutter use. So you see again a svara. There's something that this chiddush that you can miyachid the Kli Shemelachto and LeIssur for a heter use has limits how far it goes. If it's mos, you can't be miyachid it for mutter use because it's a joke. It's a lamp. It's disgusting to use for anything else, and therefore you wouldn't be able to be miyachid it for anything else. Then Tosfos carries on and he says the reason this doesn't work is because if that was so, then Kovet Elyon and Kovet Tachten should also be mutter. Now, Kovet Elyon and Kovet Tachten is Muktza machmas chesoron kis, and Tosfos is mashma that yichud would help for Muktza machmas chesoron kis. So you see that Tosfos' svara is that yichud helps for Muktza machmas chesoron kis, doesn't help for Muktza machmas mios, and obviously helps as per our sugya for Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, for regular Kli Shemelachto LeIssur.
Will it help by removing the category of Muktza because then I'm no longer capitalizing?
Something like that, yeah. That would be the svara, something like that, yeah. Yeah.
Why is Chesron Kiss more that you're able to miyachid it in a way that you can't for Mias? I understand you're saying it's a joke with Mias, but surely it'd be a joke with Chesron Kiss. That's the whole point. You wouldn't want to be miyachid it for anything else.
So first of all, that was the point I was making. That's why I was doing all this maths. And as I was saying it aloud, I realized I was getting people into sukkahs that maybe others haven't learned. But I think the story is, as you just said, that that to the degree that you're miyachid it for other use, you're saying that it's not chesaron kiss for me. And as mos is something physical about the object, it's mos, and therefore it's removed from other uses, and yichud wouldn't help. Whereas chesaron kiss is because of the way we humans use things. It's a valuable thing, and we wouldn't normally use it for it. And therefore, if I decide to use it for that, then that would cease to be a cliche. It would cease to be chesaron kiss. That seems to be the sorrow. The truth is, I'm a bit troubled by it, which is why I'm making these errors. Just to summarize, because I'm trying not to get all of us confused. We have effectively four scenarios. We have regular weaving equipment, which is Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, and regular lamp, which is Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Then we have an old lamp or a tar lamp, which is Muktza machmas mios, and Kovet Elyon and Kovet Tachten, which is Muktza machmas chesaron kis. With the case of the regular weaving equipment, Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter. Says Tosfos, how can a Kli Shemelachto LeIssur be mutter l'torach gufay? Answers Tosfos' suggested answer that you miyachid it for mutter use as per our Gemara that yichud helps for Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Says Tosfos that can't be the case because then even the Kovet Elyon and Kovet Tachten would be mutter if you miyachid it for use. And the Gemara says it's also, i.e., yichud would help for Muktza machmas chesaron kis, and therefore Tosfos says it can't be that we're talking about a case of yichud. So we've now established two pieces of information so far. Our Gemara, which tells us that yichud helps for Kli Shemelachto LeIssur, and Tosfos, who assumes that yichud helps for Muktza machmas chesaron kis. Okay. Then we get to the case of the lamp. Tosfos asks the same question. The lamp is Kli Shemelachto LeIssur. Why should it be mutter l'socha for the soch makomim? again, Tosfos wants to suggest maybe it's talking about a case of yichud. And here, Tosfos isn't bothered by the fact that the mius case would be Muktza, even though it's yichud. Why would the kli that's mos, the old kli or the tar kli, be Muktza? Because it's mos. I was miyachid it for heta. Evidently, Tosfos held with Muktza machmas mius. It's not yichud doesn't help. Why would it be that yichud doesn't help with mius and it does help with Muktza machmas donkis? I don't know, but I think your stress man was correct that maybe with Muktza machmas donkis, to the degree I'm miyachid, I'm saying I'm not makbid on it. Whereas with mos, it's bechefsa, intrinsically something that's disgusting, and that's something that you would be makbid on. I'm saying as a post facto svara. In other words, evidently this svara emerges from Tosfos. I'm not saying it as a svara that I would have naturally thought to myself. But that seems to be the maths that emerges from Tosfos. Okay. The final point I want to make is in the answer of Tosfos, and I don't really have much to say on this. I'll just hand it over to you. I'm not quite sure how to read the last line of Tosfos. Tosfos says. Tosfos says, "V'yesh lo imot lo osur Rabbi Yehuda elo dumiyut petzua Egozim shemelacha grua legabi Kurnos shemiyach melacha chashuva." So Tosfos says that petzuas Egozim is a melacha grua biyachas to blacksmithing, which is a melacha chashuva. So it sounds like from Tosfos it's not just an objective thing of what's called a melacha grua and what's called a melacha chashuva. It's the relationship between the two. A relative melacha gerua compared to a core melacha chashuva is insufficient to allow the tzorich gufay. Then Tosfos says, "The kli kiyah b'shraga demishcha mutter l'talta tzorich gufan." You're allowed to use the tzorich gufan. The melacha shalahen chashuva yosim b'tzua Egozim, because their melacha is more chashuv than b'tzua Egozim. What does he mean when he says their melacha is more chashuv than b'tzua Egozim? Does he mean their main melacha? Or the tzorich gufa that you want to use it for? And he doesn't tell us what the tzorich gufa that you want to use it for is. So what's the alternative use of kli kiyah or shraga demishcha? And why is that more chashuv than klisha than the Kurnos, the pitzua Egozim of the Kurnos? Is it because the use of the alternative use is more chashuv, or is it because the ratio of uses is different? I'm just not quite sure how to read Tosfos. All the other examples Tosfos would have to say is are all examples of melacha gerua, yeah. And what defines them as melacha gerua? Is Tosfos saying that even if I wanted to use the kli kiyah or the kli demishcha, that the shraga demishcha, if I wanted to use it for melacha gerua, that would also be enough? Because the primary purpose is also that's chashuv. I'm not quite sure how to. I don't know. I wasn't quite sure how to read the last line of Tosfos. So, any suggestions? I'd be happy to hear. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Okay. Good. So we'll move on to Mitzvah Hashem to the next year.
Well, some might be the alternative.
Yeah.
It sounds to me to be more correct alternative.
More, sorry?
Is that what in terms of a use it's more partial, but the Gemara
correct. But why is it Tosfos sounds like he's saying the core use is more chashuv, or he's saying the alternative use is more chashuv. It doesn't tell us what the alternative use is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it's. I would think it's Keli, but it's not.
Yeah.
Because
No, I don't know how to move with it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.